It's no secret that American vehicles are my primary interest, though I never really cared that much for the Bradley. I thought of it as an okay IFV that had some interesting media created for it, namely the second to none promotion and Pentagon Wars, a comedy about its troubled development. I knew that Pentagon Wars was heavily dramatized, but when I was making my historically accurate video on War Thunder's Bradley, some things really stuck out to me. So I decided to pick up the Pentagon Wars book written by Colonel James Burton, the main character of the Pentagon Wars movie. I thought I could learn some things, and even make a video about what was different between the movie and the book. What I discovered is that Colonel James Burton is nowhere close to being the man that is portrayed in the movie. And not only should the movie not be taken at any sort of value, but neither should his book. This may sound pretty harsh on the surface. I mean, he just wanted to make the Bradley more survivable, right? He was just doing his job. Not quite. The movie makes Burton out to be this naive young officer who volunteered for a congressional program, a man who just wants to do the right thing. The truth is that Burton was not new to the politics of military procurement. In fact, he belonged to a group of people called reformers. People like Pierre Spray and Mike Sparks. I bet that people who research military aircraft already know what I'm talking about. The reformers are a tightly knit group of people that believe the US military just wants to throw men and money at problems, and that the entire procurement process is broken. Instead of throwing men with high-tech equipment at problems, the reformers' alternative, funnily enough, is to throw men with outdated equipment at problems. No, that isn't a joke. Pierre Spray unironically believes that we should be using M48s instead of M1s, even stating that the M48 is more survivable than the M1, citing that no live-fire test has been conducted on a combat-loaded M1. I'm no expert, but I am much more experienced with YouTube searches, so I'll give Pierre some credit here. And our good friend Mike Sparks believes that the M113 is a gift from God, which could even be made into an aircraft. No, that isn't a joke either. This is an actual, serious concept they have on their website. Point is, Burton is a proud member of this group, and even declares that he is decidedly anti-tech. Anyone with a basic understanding of, well, anything, should realize how moronic that concept is, but apparently not Burton. Burton, much like his friends, also liked thinking up harebrained concepts like the infamous Aerogavin. Burton wanted to create what he would call a blitz fighter, an aircraft with only a 30mm cannon, a titanium bathtub cockpit, and a radio. No CCIP, no radar, no thermals, and no missiles. Or as Burton would call them, high-priced junk. According to Burton, this aircraft will fly at treetop level, using only its cannon to kill Soviet tanks. I can think of a few issues with this idea, namely, when Burton proposed his idea for an even more antiquated A-10 to his superior rightly declared that at least a radar was necessary. Burton basically replied to this by saying, "Oh, you like radars, bitch boy? What, do you like killing refugees?" Obviously that's not an exact quote, but you get the gist. When his Blitzfighter idea got shot down, Burton got together with Pierre Spray, and they came up with a proposal called the Joint Live Fire Test Program. The aim of this program, with no exaggeration, was to take everything from AFVs to fighters to ships, load them up with fuel and ammunition, and shoot at them with weapons they were never designed to withstand. For something like a tank, this sounds fairly reasonable, but for something like a ship, IFV, or plane, I think you can see the issue. If you shoot an anti-ship missile at your destroyer, and it splits in half, congratulations, you're down over $1 billion in taxpayer money and you learn practically nothing. The Air Force and Navy wisely told Burton to get lost, but the Army actually opted into the program. Yes, that's right. The Army allowed these tests to happen in the first place. The movie makes it seem like the Army was forced to participate by Congress, and Burton claims that the Army was trying to do everything in its power to kill his live-fire tests, because the Army was supposedly afraid that if the Bradley failed the tests, Congress would slash the program's funding. The complete opposite is true. The Army's Ballistic Research Laboratory didn't want to fire large-diameter heat warheads at the Bradley, specifically because they knew the Bradley wasn't designed to survive anything that strong. The Bradley was only designed to withstand 14.5mm HMG fire. The Army's BLR knew that it would fail spectacularly, and loudly proclaimed that this would be the case. Furthermore, they agreed to live-fire tests, but with some stipulations. The Ballistics Research Laboratory preferred smaller point-by-point tests, where all of the variables could be controlled. Burton completely misrepresents these measures. In the movie, the test dummies are stripped of their clothes when Burton isn't looking. In actuality, the dummies had their clothes dampened with water. Even that seems pretty suspicious, right? Not when you consider that this particular test was supposed to be a vaporifics test. The idea that aluminum armor, when struck with a shaped charge, would create toxic fumes. The thing Burton was so worried about in the first place. The clothes on the dummies were wetted so they wouldn't catch fire. That way they wouldn't interfere with the atmospheric readings inside the vehicle. And that part where the Bradley's fuel tanks are filled with water? Well, I'm no expert, but I assume that if you wanted to see what kind of spall pattern you could expect from a shell, or what systems it would hit, you wouldn't want that vehicle catching fire and melting into aluminum puddle, or exploding altogether. Burton also has a fundamental misunderstanding of the Bradley program as a whole. He thinks it started out as essentially a modernized M113, a simple APC that would carry 11 men, and that people just kept adding stuff onto it. The truth is, the Bradley was designed as an IFE from the very start, as a direct response to the BMP-1. It was always supposed to have a turret with a cannon, it was always supposed to have firing ports, and originally, it was supposed to carry 9 men. The original 20mm cannon was eventually swapped out for the Bushmaster, and after the XM800 recon vehicle program was slashed, the Bradley took over its role. This wasn't as drastic as people think. The Bradley already had the qualities of a scout vehicle. As a side effect of this change, and because the Army thought it would convince Congress that the Bradley was worth keeping, the tow launcher was added on. These changes did reduce the squad size from 9 to 6, but overall, the effectiveness of the unit went up. At the cost of 3 men, they gained a cannon with a thermal sight, as well as long-range anti-tank capability, that could be sustained thanks to the Bradley carrying a total of 7 missiles. Burton also likes to think that this program had a direct impact on the Bradley's development, and that he is directly responsible for helping save lives in Desert Storm. This is not true to reality. Long before Burton ever got involved, Congress was already questioning the Bradley's survivability. Burton got involved specifically because the Bradley was receiving a lot of attention. By the time Burton's program was underway, the Army had already been working on the E1, what would eventually become the A1. The A1 model introduced some minor survivability improvements, but more importantly, it gave the Bradley the ability to fire TOW-2s. The Army made a Bradley to Burton's specifications, called the Minimum Casualty Baseline Vehicle, or as the Army called it, the Advanced Survivability Testbed. Burton's design moved almost all of the fuel and ammunition to the outside of the vehicle, an amazingly inept design decision. The Army was not a fan of this concept, saying this would result in the fuel and ammo being quote-unquote zapped by artillery. This concept also made the Bradley much larger. Burton claimed this was only temporary, as the final vehicle would have blowout panels, a concept that he was shocked had not been used. It's not exactly shocking to me. Blowout panels take up space. Less space means you can't carry as many men. Since the ammo is stored in the vehicle's sides, the panel door would be facing the inside of the vehicle. If the Bradley was shot in the side, the most likely place to get shot, the door would have a giant hole in it, and the blowout panels wouldn't make much of a difference. Burton's vehicle had competition, the Army's high survivability testbed. There was more infighting over test protocols, but eventually, there was a straw that broke the camel's back. Burton was absolutely shocked, completely appalled, that the Army had moved the Bradley's standard water supply closer to the center of the vehicle. Why, if they shot center mass in the tests, that water could douse an ammunition fire. That's cheating. I guess it didn't occur to Burton that this was an attempt to improve survivability on a vehicle that was called the High Survivability Testbed, and that this change had already been proposed 2 years prior. Colonel Burton, who was outraged, wrote a memo complaining about the tests. After he did this, he received orders to transfer to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. Instead of just accepting this and going on with his life, he retired from the Air Force, claiming that he was forced to retire in the movie, which is hilarious to me. In the movie and book, Burton is made out to be this level-headed individual, who just wants to do the right thing, and everyone who disagrees with him is either corrupt or incompetent, just people looking to advance their own position in the world. Which is funny, considering he essentially threw in the towel when he didn't get things his way. The Army accepted their testbed in the service as the M2A2, which would later see service in Desert Storm. The Vaporifics test found no evidence that would create casualties, but the Army already knew that. There's more I could talk about, like how Burton thought that Romanian RPGs were much less powerful than Soviet RPGs, despite having around the same penetrative capability. But it doesn't matter. What does matter is that to normal people, it seems like these reformers are making valid points. They don't realize that these people have no idea what they're talking about. It's why you get people saying stuff like the A-10 is better than the F-35. I guess if I had to make a closing statement, it'd be this. Don't take the Pentagon Wars movie as anything more than a satire on government bureaucracy. If you actually want to learn about the Bradley's development, read Honeycutt's book or something. Or I could make a video on it later. Either way, I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I'll see you on the next one.